Greeting, my Imagiteers, how are you all doing? Well, we've now reached just a few over 100 subscribers for this channel. We can't thank you enough. So what are we going to do? Add another video to the Final Fantasy VII pile, that's what. One of the big literal game changers in both video game culture and the video game industry. That was a common thing in the 90s now that I think about it. But how big are we talking? Final Fantasy VII, on its own, still to this day, is the highest selling in the main series. With such a diverse cast of characters, magnificent story, interesting plot, side quest galore, fantastic gameplay for its time, and in many respects still holds up. Music that is, for want of better terms, legendary. So of course there was going to be a remake, kind of, 23 years later. And before this remake, you had the compilation of Final Fantasy VII. A couple of prequels, a couple of sequels, and a kind of OVA midquel. However, there's one thing in particular that I want to tackle with this game. We are going to do a full review though, my buddy Crane's going to take care of that. But as it says in the title, we're focusing on the voice acting. English voice acting. Analyzing performances and comparing to the English voices that came before. And I'll get this out of the way, the Japanese cast was amazing, alright? I mean, of course, they had the advantage of doing the voice recording first. However, have a listen to the French cast, because they just knock it out of the park entirely. Especially Bruno Choel as Sephiroth. Oh, good lord, he's amazing. However, my specialty is English. And this English cast and performances, I can actually split into 4 groups. Downgrades, upgrades, questionable, meaning they seem somewhat pointless, and then a kind of mixed bag. What do I mean by mixed bag? There are some actors in here who perform the roles very well, but their voices don't quite match the characters. What do I mean? Let's dive in. The Final Fantasy VII Remake voice acting. Is it good or is it bad? Let's start with both characters who were originally unvoiced and new characters made specifically for the game. One I'll save towards the end though. But first, let's start with the Shinra Corporation. Okay, their voices fit very well, and so do the performances, but I've noticed that in this game, the evils just ramped way up. In the original game, you kind of got the idea that while evil, they were still businessmen and women. They were just focused on getting the job done. Sure, some enjoyed it more than others, namely Scarlet and Heidegger, but President Shinra, yeah, you got the feeling that he was just doing what was necessary, albeit with a bit of joy. But Heidegger and Scarlet in this, oh, they are so twirly villain mustache. And their actors, John DiMaggio, yes, that John DiMaggio, and Aaron Cottrell were just having way too much fun with these roles. Scarlet was just this typical femme fatale, amped up. She uses one of the Shinra soldiers as a footstool, for God's sake, and from what I can see, he's not allowed to ever get up. He has to crawl after every single time. And she just delights in giving torture to people. She actually says that. And then, of course, John DiMaggio's Heidegger. You can't go wrong with John DiMaggio. That guy is a god emperor of voice acting as far as I can tell. And practically unrecognizable. And he is intimidating while also being funny. More funny than intimidating, but, well, we'll also see what comes with the second part of this game. William Salyers, I think that's how it's pronounced. Salyers? Correct me in the comments. They've really made Palmer really creepy in this game. And I honestly don't know how I should feel about it. The guy actually delights in torturing people in a very dark way, it seems. And that's all I'll say, without giving away too many spoilers. But this guy made the voice work. I'm not going to take that away. And no one else should. Then James Horan as President Shinra, a dark businessman who also kind of enjoys what he does, but also has this great sense of, there's something bigger than all of this, and I must be the one to do it. Such a great ego. So, yeah, no problems there. But then we have Don Corneo, voiced by Fred Tatasciore, who a lot of people thought was Mark Hamill, including yours truly. Because let's face it, that kind of sounds like one of Mark Hamill's voices. Now, I was also kind of hoping that wouldn't be the case, because if they got Mark Hamill to voice this fat piece of... Ugh. Why didn't they get him as Kefka? But that's neither here nor there. Then there's many unoriginal character in this game, such as Marl, Katie, Weimer, Gwen, and Ah yes, these three. Madam M, Chocobo Sam, who I have no idea if he's related to Chocobo Billy or not, and Andrea Rodeo. Trevor Duvall, you are also having way too much fun here. Yet somehow surprisingly dignified. We have this guy who's so fixated on beauty, but has this kind of elegance and strength about him. And, is one of the people who says that Don Corneo is worthy of this girl's time or something like that. Yeah, okay, the story does get a little bit weird. I mean, okay, it was originally weird in some parts of the original game, but that actually added to the universe's charm. This was, I have no idea. But Trevor Duvall really made it work. Cannot take that away. And there's actually a huge amount of new characters in this, such as Muriel, and I mentioned Marl earlier before, voiced by Barbara Goodson, and Muriel, voiced by Susan Silo. Great voice acting legends. And they almost make me wish they were in the original game. What do I mean? Play the game, you'll see what I mean. But then there's one character who's actually kind of changed from the original and given a much bigger part, and that is Johnny, voiced by Yuri Lowenthal, who I have no idea how, but I didn't recognize him. Johnny this time is now a kind of sly weasel, whereas in the original game, he was kind of standoffish and didn't have really that much to say and do. Just, hey Cloud, how you doing? Here, he's got a lot of bad luck, always trying to do the right thing, while also doing the wrong thing. He's an idiot. A competent idiot. Yes, I know, but that's the best way I can describe it right now. But Yuri pulls it off fantastically. And again, I'm impressed because I somehow didn't recognize Yuri Lowenthal, a man who has a very distinctive youthful voice. Props, my man. Props also to Ian Reitel, who voiced Deputy Mayor Hart, and Neil Ross, who voiced Mayor Domino, who played much bigger parts in this. And, okay, I really can't say any more than that for now, because I know the game's been out for a little while, but I still don't want to spoil it for those who haven't played it. But let's just say that you'll really like these guys. There are many other great ones out there, but for now, I'm going to finish with the big three. Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse. Thanks to the game being set entirely in Midgard this time, they were able to really flesh out these characters. And, oh, you'll feel a lot more sorry for Jesse, believe me. These guys are actually straight-up show stealers. Matt L. Jones, especially as Wedge, is just so adorable. And I'm actually very happy with this performance because when I first heard him in the first English trailers, back when we thought Steve Burton and all the others would reprise their roles, he sounded off somehow. Way too raspy and wimpy! This time, however, it's a much fuller voice. Okay, a bit of voice acting talk here. A full voice means that you fill it up somehow with something like a chest resonance or a stomach resonance or even a kind of head resonance. Here, I'll show you what I mean. From this...
Doing this for the planet. Same as us. Not interested.
To this.
Come on, nobody do something this crazy just for money.
See what I mean? Erica Lindblick as Jessie is certainly a very fine performance. Very, very charming performance, actually. Even if she does seem like a little bit of a sneaky... something or other. That's all I'll say about that. But at the same time, they don't make Jessie a bad person anyway. And she still has this strong sense of justice, as well as a strong sense of duty to her friends and family. And finally, Gideon Emery as Biggs. Now this is where most of the praise will end. For now. Because here's the thing. He performs the role of Biggs fantastically. A tough guy who's also a tech genius, but his voice reflects the genius too much and not enough of the tough guy. Now, I don't think that's necessarily miscast, because I've heard Gideon pull off a more brutish voice here and there. But I do think that's definitely not quite the right voice. I think that could have been worked on a little bit more. But that said, he performs the role so well that I don't care. So there's that. For now, this is where we'll stop talking about the voice cast for the unvoiced characters. Now let's go into the new voices for the, well, really the main cast. Brace yourself, people, because here's where it gets a little bit all over the place. Let's start off with the big guy himself, Cloud Strife, voiced this time by Cody Christian. This one fascinates me. A lot. Because I have no idea what was going on with the direction of this guy. His performance overall was pretty solid, I'm not going to take that away. Like, he got the emotions right and everything like that, while at times falling into the speak talk trap. Speak talk meaning that he's trying really hard to be anime! Not quite like, okay, not quite that exaggerated, but, you know, just to help you get an idea. And to be fair, that was mostly in the early stages of the game. Towards the end, that's when he got into his stride in terms of the emotional sides of the performance. His voice, however, it's strange. He goes back and forth from trying to be a Steve Burton clone and doing his own thing. To be fair, this game had 5 different voice directors. I don't know if he had the one director the whole way through, but I would assume not. Could be wrong, but yeah, that's kind of how it works. It's obvious, though, that he was passionate for this role and he tried his damnedest, but that was a little distracting at times. And overall, his voice does come off a little bit more generic. Now, comparing him to the original English Cloud voice, that was Steve Burton. Steve Burton's voice for Cloud, you can't get any better than that. It's practically perfect. However, Steve's performances were very hit and miss. But now that I can blame entirely on direction. One clue about that? Well, whenever you hear Steve talk about Cloud, he knows the character inside and out, and it's obvious that he has a ball voicing him. And you could tell that he was really sad, even hurt that he wasn't coming back as Cloud for this game. But yeah, it's an interesting conundrum here. On one hand, you have an actor whose voice is generic, but a performance that pretty much makes up for it. And another guy who has hit and miss performances, but the absolutely perfect voice. It's exactly the same as Tifa. Rachel Lee Cook has a perfect voice for Tifa. Hell, she even kinda looks like her. Whereas Britt Baron performed the role very well. But I found her voice a little bit too low. It was the right amount of husky, meaning that kind of scratchy voice, but it was a bit too far down here. Do you know what I mean? But she performs the role so well that I almost don't care. But now let's talk about an upgrade. John Eric Bentley as Barrett. Now, the original voice of Barrett was Beau Billingsley. Jet Black from... yeah, from Cowboy Bebop. I don't need to say any more than that. And Beau easily could have done just as good a job. But John Eric Bentley, his voice is perfect, and he had the advantage of working with some really good dialogue. I mean, being this tough, mighty leader of a good-hearted terrorist group... Yes, I know, that sounds weird to say. While also being Father of the Year, that's not an easy thing to pull off, and Bentley did that perfectly. So I can't take that away from him. Kinda the same deal with Red 13. Liam O'Brien only had one line. One line. So of course Max Mittelman was going to have an advantage in the game. So, yeah, that's very hard to compare. Liam, all I can say is Liam could have done it, but the vote goes to Max, simply because of he had a huge amount of dialogue and a very good voice. Then you get John Root as Reeve Twesty. Jamison Price voiced him originally, and Jamison Price is one of those men who can do no wrong, completely impervious to weak, unfocused, or straight-up bad direction. Now, one could argue that his voice was a little too deep, but he performed the role so well that you didn't care. Whereas John Root's voice, you could argue, was much more fitting for Reeve. And his performance, again, very solid. You could feel this guilt, this sense of justice not being fulfilled from this guy. The other upgrade would be William C. Stevens as Rude. The original voice of Rude was Crispin Freeman, who I also thought would have made a fantastic Sephiroth, but that's for later. Now, the characterization of Rude in this game is a bit different compared to the old one. In the old game, he was much more introverted, like hated to talk. This version of Rude is a little bit more chatty. Crispin Freeman did give the sense that he only spoke whenever he felt like he had something to say, whereas this guy always felt like he was a man on a mission, so it's kind of hard to say which one is better in this regard. No, really, I can't decide. In Reno's case, however, it goes to Quentin Flynn. I mean, it's Quentin Flynn. That guy is one of the great voice actors. He was fantastic as Raiden, and as Reno, again, he kind of stole the show in Advent Children. He had the perfect amount of snark, while at the same time a strange sense of compassion, and of course, a great big sense of duty. Ani Pantoja? He tried. and to his credit, he performed Reno very well, but even doing the snarky lines and even being allowed to swear, which helped Reno's character somehow, Quentin Flynn left way too big a shoes to fill there. So I'm sorry. So you have that disadvantage for some of these actors trying to take over. Vic Shower's song was an interesting one. I can't choose between him and Ryan Yu as to which one is the better song. Both have this sense of duty and doing what needs to be done, while at the same time this sense of honor about them. No, I really can't decide. This really now comes down to taste in terms of voice. Ryan Yu was a bit more smooth, whereas Vic Chow here is a little bit more of a rough grating voice. So that just comes down to who you prefer in terms of vocal timbre. But now this is where it gets interesting. Josh Bowman versus Wally Wingert as Rufus Shinra. Technically speaking, they're voicing almost completely different characters. Rufus in Advent Children was this redeemed sinner, trying very hard to make up for a lot of mistakes, whereas Josh Bowman is the sexy bad guy. So that's kind of hard to compare, but I love what Josh brings to the table as Rufus though. Especially when he just knows how to be snarky, intimidating, and even kind of funny.
Just the two of us. Well, maybe three.
See what I mean? And then you have Sephiroth. And you know what? Slight spoiler, but I'm putting him in here as well. Zack. Now, how do I put this delicately? They're completely miscast! Now, before I go any further, these two are actually very fine actors. But it doesn't matter how great of an actor you are. If you don't fit the role, you don't fit the role. Caleb Pierce I'm willing to give a bit of slack because I can't help but feel like that was a rushed job. But even then, his voice really doesn't work for Zack. Too high and too nasally. Rick Gomez, even if you could say that he wasn't the voice you imagined him having, it still worked perfectly, and he was just so adorable, so charming. It's nearly impossible to match that. And Caleb Pierce, I'm sorry. I'm just sorry, but I'm hoping that he actually can come up with something better later on, but wow, that doesn't work. As for Tyler Hoechlin, I actually feel bad because you know he's trying really hard to get the performance right. You know he's trying really hard to give a fitting voice because, to be fair, that's actually a really cool voice and it sounds almost nothing like his natural voice. But even a cool voice does not mean a good fit. Say whatever you want about George Newbern. His voice worked for Sephiroth. Even though I personally thought his voice, and in the early stages his performance would have been better suited for Vincent, it made sense. It worked for the character. Now he did fall into the trap of weak direction, especially in the Dissidia games. But Newbern really showed what he could do as Sephiroth in, of all things, Mobius Final Fantasy, a mobile app video game, which really didn't need that much effort. He sounded really good in that. He had the perfect level of malice, the perfect level of confidence. No, not confidence, conviction. That's what makes Sephiroth such a scary villain. He knows what he's doing, but he honestly feels that it's the right thing to do. Hoechlin? Oh, he tried. He tried really hard. And I give him so much credit for that. But that voice just does not work. That said, he'd probably make a fantastic Magus from Chrono Trigger. Or is it Magus? I don't know. But I still don't get why he was cast as Sephiroth. Why not get the highly used but perfectly used Troy Baker? Or hell, how about Paul Dobson, the man who was originally rumoured to be Sephiroth during the Advent Children English casting days? Or if you want to go a little bit left field, there's Robert Kraft and Andrew Love. Or, you know what? If you're going to get a live-action Superman actor, Henry Cavill! He would have made time. Just an American version of his Geralt voice, and it would have been amazing. But now, with all my complaints about Sephiroth and Zack, it does even out. With James C. as Hojo and Brianna White as Aerith. Holy hell, what an upgrade! Paul Eiding was the original voice of Hojo, and while he was not miscast, he was horribly misdirected.
He was way too stereotypical mad scientist.
James C., however, had... he was freaky. Scary, even. While also being creepy as hell. Yeah, you could argue they amped up his creepiness a little too much, but James C. pulled it off perfectly, while having an incredible amount of intelligence, giving off this constant feel that he was 2 or even 3 steps ahead. Then you have Brianna White. Now, granted, this is her first major voice acting role, and she's primarily a screen actor. In fact, that's actually one thing I've noticed with this new cast. Most of them are primarily screen actors, and a lot of them came from the TV show Teen Wolf. Make of that what you will. Now, that's not to say that TV actors can't do well in voice acting. You know what, for the original cast, Rachel Leigh Cook, while she's done some voice work, particularly for Batman Beyond, she's primarily a screen actress. Same deal with Steve Burton. In fact, he's only voiced Cloud in anything animation or video game related. Otherwise, General Hospital, and a few other screen shows here and there. He was robbed of an Oscar nomination for The Last Castle, but that's another story. But those actors knew how to keep their voices consistent. These new actors? Not quite. But they make up for it with a pretty solid performance. And Brianna White is such a show stealer. You can tell that there are times where she was directed just to get the performance right, and other times to get the performance right while having that sweet, lovely, innocent voice. But her performance never lapsed. And she had the perfect amount of sass, she had the perfect amount of kindness, even the perfect amount of sorrow. Now, one could argue that she also had better writing to work with, because the actresses who came before her, they really got the bad end of the stick. They were all directed to kind of be elegant princesses or sacred angelic ladies. They didn't get a chance to really get into Aerith's main character. The only one who even came close was Mina Suvari, and don't be too harsh on her. She was brought in last minute, had very little context, and was just told to do what needed to be done. In the later parts of Kingdom Hearts 2, she did better, and I honestly thought she deserved a second chance. But then Andrea Bowen took over, and, well, for a while she was the go-to for Aerith. And she did very well. Also props to Mandy Moore for being the original voice actress. Well, English voice actress. And she did well for what was given, but again, not really given much of a chance to actually really dive deep into the character. Brianna White brought it all out and then some. Oh, she was just so adorable. And I just believed every second of it, even with the occasional inconsistent voice. So far, she's the best. Hands down. It probably does help that she was a big Final Fantasy VII fan to begin with, but even then, wow. Just wow. I tip my hat to you, Brianna. Now, before we end this, there's one guy I want to talk about. A new character made specifically for this game, and God, I really wanted more of him. And that is Roche, voiced by Austin Lee Matthews. Now, remember how I said earlier how some actors were having a little too much fun? This guy was having fun to the point where I actually thought there should be a law against it. I wanted more of Roche, just for that performance alone. But Austin Lee Matthews actually gave him a bit of a sense of history, which is actually a hard feat to pull off, while sounding absolutely loony, and yet knowing how to pull it back to sound kind of intimidating. I wanted more of this guy, and I was actually hoping he was going to be the final boss. But, well, we know what happens there. And to those who haven't played the game yet, you'll see. But this guy did not have enough screen time. Or game time, I don't know. But, oh god, I really want him to come back. They need to utilize the hell out of this guy. Make him a main antagonist in the second part of this game. And you know what? See if you can make him a playable character. Just give me more of Roche! Now, there were others who I didn't quite get into, such as Julie Dolan as Elmira Gainsborough, who was absolutely wonderful, by the way. But this video's gone on for quite a long time, so now I leave the floor open to you. What were your thoughts on the new English voices? Were they better or worse than the originals, or were they a mixed bag? Were there some voices that you really loved? Were there some voices that you really hated? What about the cast for the characters who weren't voiced originally? What were your thoughts on them? Tell us all about it below in the comments. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video and hearing what I had to say about this matter. If you like this video, then aptly hit that like button. If you want to see more editorials from us, as well as reviews, fan films, original shorts, and more, remember to hit that subscribe button and hit that bell to all. If you want to support this channel and help it grow, 2 things you can do. The first thing you can do is share this video. You might know someone who'll like this kind of content. Don't be afraid to let them know. The other thing you can do is support us on Patreon. All we ask is for $1 a month. That's it. You can give more if you want, and we'll be very grateful if you do, but we'll be more than grateful for just that $1. Because if enough people do that, we can do and make so much more for you. This is Ozzyroth, signing off and thanking you. And remember, if you can imagine it, you can create it.